Okay, so I'm reposting this video I did about a month and a half ago. A couple weeks ago I took it down. There was a little bit of confusion about the message I was trying to convey about these underground workings. A few people thought that I was trying to say, hey, go up here and try and get in this old mine and explore it. That's not what I was trying to say at all. Pretty much just the opposite of that. These old mines are dangerous. Any old mine, you really don't want to go in them in the first place. But let's go through the reasons real quick on this mine. One, it's private property. A lot of the mines, the bigger mines here in Eastern Oregon, wound up being patented ground, which means it's private. So you need permission. If you wanted to go underground, you would need permission to do that. Without the landowner permission, forget it. And they're not going to give you permission to go underground. There's way too much liability involved in that. Two, this old mine had lots of documented history of bad air in it. You're a long ways underground. If you were able to get clear back in this mine, you're a long ways underground. So it needed ventilation, either by fans or self-ventilation through open portals in order to do that. Well, all those portals have been closed up for a long time. I've been hiking around that mountain looking at things since about 1988. And the two portals I knew of that were open back in the day when UNC was in there and rehabbed that mine have long since closed up. Probably 15, 20 years ago, those closed up. So there's no ventilation through this mine. So keep that in mind. If you were able to somehow get back in there, you would probably not come back out of that mine just because of lack of oxygen. Three, which kind of ties into that, all the portals have closed up a long time ago. You'll hear me mention in these videos, oh, I was really hoping to see. Well, the reason I was hoping to see this portal open was more from a historic standpoint, especially some of the ones that are higher up on the mountain that maybe they survived over 100 years of being open and they were still, there. Well, that's not the case. All of those have closed up. That's been that way for quite a long time. So I would guess some like the Mayflower workings and some of those have been closed up, I don't know, 70 years probably or better. So when you hear me say I was hoping to see this open, it's not that I want to get in there and explore that mine. This is one mine I would never want to explore. It would have been interesting to see it when UNC rehabbed some of the workings, to get in there and look at it when they were in there and it was safe. But as soon as the mine shuts down and it sat there for a while, boy, you're taking your life in your own hands going in, especially the geology that's at this mine. I've been in other mines that the geology is pretty stable. This mine is absolutely not one of those mines. So keep that in mind. The owners don't want you up there inside that mine, and it would be a terrible idea anyway. Even if they'd let you in there, it would be a terrible idea to go in this mine. Let me make that perfectly clear. Terrible idea to try and get in these old mines, especially ones like this. They're huge. 36 miles. You could get lost. You probably won't even come out. So anyway, the owners are nice enough to let you walk up or go up and see the mansion, see those big waste rock piles. There's some huge waste rock piles, and just the manpower it took to do those is pretty impressive to look at. So don't destroy it for everybody by going up there and trying to get in this mine. The landowners, they own a lodge up there. If you want to stop for lunch or dinner, I must say they have some excellent food. While we were up there filming, we ate there at the lodge, and pretty good place. So it's worth a trip up to look at. So anyway, enjoy the videos. Just keep that in mind. I'm not saying to go up and explore the insides of these mines. Look all you want on the outside. Stay out of them. Well, welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about a question I get that pops up quite often in some of the comments about these mine videos. And today, specifically, we're going to be talking about the Cornucopia Mine, which is by far the largest mine in Northeast Oregon, probably in most of Oregon. It's got between 32 and 36 miles of underground workings in it. And as near as I can estimate, it's probably a little closer to the 36 miles worth of workings. I've seen estimates from the Department of Geology, anywhere from 32 to 36, but I'm going to go with the 36 miles. Now this mine is huge. It's an absolute monster of a mine. And the question that pops up all the time is, how do we get in there and explore that? How do we get and see those underground workings? Well, today we're going to talk about this mine. I'm going to show you what this mine looks like underground from a 3D perspective. And we're going to talk a little bit about why it's probably not a good idea to go into this mine. Now it's kind of hard to visualize what 36 miles of underground workings look like when you're looking from the outside, from Google Earth, or just standing out at the site looking at these waste rock piles. It's pretty hard to fathom what 36 miles of underground workings actually look like. So what we're going to do today is dive in from the outside view and then dive in underground and see what this actually looks like from a 3D perspective and kind of get a scope of how big this mine actually is, and some of the workings and some of the importance of different workings within the mine and how important those wound up being to the overall production of the mine. So what we looked at there was a Google Earth shot and then fading into what it would look like underground. And so we're going to look at this from an underground perspective. This is kind of a 3D model of what we're looking at here is just the Union Companion vein. We'll look at the other workings here in a moment. But first, let's dive into this, the initial Union Companion and where the Coulter Tunnel connects to. As you can see right here, this long one coming out this way, that's the Coulter Tunnel. That comes out pretty much at the level of Pine Creek, which is just to the east of most of the workings. And that tunnel is about 63, 64, 6,500, somewhere in there, feet long. It's a long, pretty much straight shot back to the Union Companion workings. Now, if we swing around over here, this is looking to the south, kind of looking across the vein. As you can tell, this vein kind of dips at generally a 45-degree angle. Up here towards the top, it gets a little steeper in a couple spots. Looking at the old maps, that's pretty much the layout. Now these upper workings, clear down here to about right in there, up to here, are very well documented in old maps. Different section views, different views of these. So I'm pretty sure most of these workings on this diagram are fairly accurate. It may not be right to scale, but it's pretty close. The lower workings down here, there was only a couple different views of them, so there's some artistic interpretation here maybe on some of these. Not maybe 100% accurate, but I think they're still fairly close to what they actually were. If we look around over here, you can see that Coulter Tunnel coming in, and it connects in here at level 20. And we'll talk about these levels here more in just a minute. And each one of these are several thousand feet across from end to end on these, like level 20. That's quite a distance across there. And some of these other levels, they've done a considerable amount of work on this vein. And the reason you'll see them stop out here is either the vein pinched out, or in the case over here, they were getting very close to the surface in spots. So if you look at this view here, this is the Clark portal. A lot of maps show this as the Union Companion portal, but that's what that is. That comes up here fairly high on the mountain. Here's a Google Earth shot of this and where that would actually be located. As you can tell, it's quite a bit higher up on the mountain, away from the lower workings in the town itself. And they hauled In later years, they hauled this material from this portal down the road with a dozer, an old Caterpillar crawler. I don't think it had a blade on it, but they just used a big 100-ton dump bed on the back of it and hauled that ore down to the mill, which was down at the Coulter Tunnel. That's where all of that was processed in later years. Earlier years, it was processed right here with a mill on site, but it wasn't the most efficient mill for the type of ore they had. So they wound up later hauling it down to a mill that they'd built more purposefully built for the material they were handling. And it was a flotation plant, a lot more efficient than this one. Still not as good as the technology of today, but it was much better at retrieving the gold that they were working with. If we look up, bring it around here a little bit, you'll see there's the Red Jacket portal, there's an H-level portal, and so the original Union portal right here, which was a little bit higher up on the mountain than the Clark portal. And the reason they sank this Clark portal in there to begin with, this was an easier location to build a mill, and they could get to more workings using gravity instead of gravity working against them. They sank this in, and then they started working down from that portal. Right here, you can see what they called the main shaft. That's how they got down to those lower levels. It was a winds, they'd sank down in there and started working these lower levels. And it followed the incline of the vein, which is about 45 degrees. So if you could get in there and look at that, that would be at about a 45-degree angle coming down to these levels. And originally, if we zoom in here just a little bit, what's shown as level 13 or 7. Now, there's some confusion on the mapping, and you'll see it on these old maps from this mine both ways. You'll see it numbered one way on one map and one way on the other map. So the way this worked was anything above the Clark level, which was level 0, was given a letter designation, A, B, C, D, and on up to the top level, level H. And then anything below that was given a number level, so level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, down to, off the original workings, down to level 7. So they did 7 levels, or about 700 feet on the vein from the original level. Now below that, you'll see here on this screen here that some of them on the maps were given both level 14 or level 8, level 15 or level 9. So for a while they were evidently using both designations, and then later they went strictly based off of level 20 and then worked up from there. And how they got to level 20 was they went to these upper levels and started counting at 1 and then went down. I didn't bother doing that when I drew this. This was kind of a quick thing. I just threw this together. But if you want, you can count backwards up through these and figure out which level they were under the new terminology when they started numbering it different. It looks like this went through several iterations through the years, but anyway, this is the way this is laid out. And as you can see, this Clark Tunnel extended well past the Union companion workings, and we'll talk about more about that in just a minute. But so something to note in particular about this map in particular is this raise and this one right here. After they sank this Coulter Tunnel back in and started working here at level 20 and then started working up, there was a lot of unworked ground in here between where the old workings stopped and the new workings were working up. So all the workings here below level 0 down to level 7 had filled with water. They weren't actively pumping this out. This was in 1937 when they sank that Coulter Tunnel back in there and they started working up. None of that had been pumped out in quite a while. So they knew they wanted to get in here and work this area in here and possibly get back up in here and do some more work. But the reason, and the reason they had kind of abandoned this is they had sank this back the Clark Tunnel further back in the mountain, and we're working the last chance vein from that tunnel. So a lot of that below there had just went unused. And so when they got back in here, they started diamond drilling this in 1937, trying to connect some of these back together. Now, I think the documentation isn't real clear from what I could find, whether they core drill or diamond drilled from level 17 here up to level 13, or whether some of these intermediate levels were already there. I don't think they were. So I think what they did is they diamond drilled this and connected this with a small, like 1.5 inch, 1 3/8 bore through there, and started some water coming through. And I think from the articles I read, they hit it the first attempt, which is kind of unheard of back in those days. You know, it wasn't a super precise science, but they did manage the first shot to get a borehole through there. And then they enlarged it to a 3 inch. And then it sounds like they enlarged it to a couple 3 inch, or did a couple different 3 inch bores, and started draining this. And within a couple months, the water level had went down about 300 feet from level 0 down about 300 feet. And I think about by 6 months in, they had drained that thing completely out. Those upper workings, for the most part, they were drained. And then later, they opened this up into an actual winze that they could get through and transport gear, material, and everything else. And then they sank a second one. I'm not sure if this was a raise or a winze, whether they dug down or went up. I'm assuming they went up. Gravity's your friend in mining. So I assume they put this second raise in later, and so they could, the idea was any workings that they did up here, instead of hauling this stuff out through the Clark portal and then down the mountain on the cat setup with only 100 tons at a time, they could do it all internal to the mine and bring it right out through the Coulter Tunnel, right directly to the mill. So it would increase the productivity and efficiency of the operation. So those, and the other thing to look at here is below level 20, they did sink a couple levels down here on the vein. And I think they hit a massive amount of water in here as well. Talking to some of the guys that worked in this mine in the 1980s, when they came back in here in the 1980s, they extended this back about 300 or 400 feet, this Coulter Tunnel, and made a room in here and started diamond drilling. They drilled down into this vein and to see what they could find. And the indication I got from the guys that worked in there was there's a massive amount of water even then coming out of this mine, like 5,000 gallons a minute coming out of this portal, which I'll show you in just a minute what that looks like. And I don't doubt it's a large amount of water that comes out of this mine. But the old timers, they did get down here and work some of these lower levels. The mine shut down before much of this got worked below this level. You can tell level 21 here, they did do a fairly extensive amount of work at that level, and that's below, so they would have had to pump water up out of this, and same with this level here. The other interesting thing to note, talking to a miner that had actually been in here that extended this back, I asked him if he had a chance to explore, or did they explore any of these side tunnels much. And you know, he was part of a contract crew and they were working, so they didn't do a lot of exploring. But he said both these side drifts going off of here were in pretty poor shape, which I would expect in this mine, just because of the geography of not the geography, but the geology of that area. These are fairly young mountains we're talking about. Geologically speaking, they're fairly young. There's still a lot of movement to these mountains, a lot of instability. And when you've got, you know, these big, large areas, you look at these workings, these drifts coming off to the side, and you got to figure most of this area in between here has been stoped out. There's probably very large stopes in here in between these levels. So the ground's going to be fairly unstable just because of all the stoping. And you've got geology that is fairly unstable to begin with these veins. around these structures are fairly unstable. So it doesn't surprise me that a lot of this that's in pretty poor shape. And this was in the 1980s, mid 80s, early 80s, when they were back in here doing this. So, you know, a lot of this is probably collapsed. Now, let's talk about this for just a minute. You're, you know, 66 or 6,400 feet back in here to this set of workings. In the old days, the other reason they opened these up to full-size winzes is it created a situation where they didn't need to pump as much air into the Coulter Tunnel. They didn't need to run those huge fans and blowers trying to get fresh air into this mine. You're a long ways underground, a lot of water in there. Oxygen levels are going to be low back in there. So when they open these up, it created an airflow through this whole mine up through the Coulter Tunnel, and I would imagine over through the Red Jacket as well. And they were able to shut the ventilation system off. That's one of the news articles. Once they completed that, those winzes, they were able to shut the ventilation system off and just use natural ventilation in most of the mine. That was a huge achievement and a huge plus, huge cost savings for the mine. It was probably better air to begin with because I'm sure they weren't getting nearly the airflow with ventilation as they would with natural ventilation once they sank these winzes in here. So that was another huge reason to do these. It was for drainage, ventilation, and access to the old workings of the mine. So, and we'll just kind of look at this. We'll just swing around here real quick. One thing I wanted to mention is each one of these openings are now closed. Most of them probably through natural means. They have closed up over the years. This is a very steep hillside. Again, very unstable geology. They naturally just close up on their own. The one level I was hoping that maybe might be open was this H level portal. I flew a drone over it. It's closed up. So all of these upper workings, the portals have all closed up now. So no, there's no access through any of these. The only one that's kind of open is down here, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Well, thanks for watching this part one of this video. Part two is going to be coming up shortly. There's a few edits I'm going to make to this, some things I found out after we did the movie up there and talking to some of the guys that work there. There's a few little edits I want to make to it. Also, part two for a while is going to be members only. I'm going to keep that as a members only video. We're setting up a membership program. I think that's what it's called. Is it membership? Anyway, there'll be a little join button down here below the videos. We're going to throw some extra content in there, some behind the scenes stuff. That's all going to be included in it. All the videos we post, members will be able to see them. I think it's 4 days early, and so on and so forth. There's just some perks to being a member, and some of the videos are going to be membership only. That second video, it's going to be member only for a while, probably a couple months, and then we'll probably roll that back out for everybody to see. But there'll be some extra content too, some things that I think you'll find really interesting that I've dug up through a lot of newspaper articles. I've spent hours and hours and hours researching these mines, especially this mine. So it'll be well worth the effort to get that membership. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in part two and some other videos.